Today, that was my first comment around. We're going to be recording this session. If you don't feel comfortable, or if you don't want to be highlighted in the video, please feel free to voice out. We can either blur you or whatever. If you and if you make a comment that you want to be erased from the video, also totally fine. But we just want to, for those that are not able to join but want to learn of what has been shared, want to see the recording afterwards. My name is Vivian Hartlief. I'm joined here today by a couple of speakers, which I will be introducing later. But maybe it's actually really nice if we can start with René van Kouwenhoven from the FNV. You can set the scene a little bit as how did this come about?
Yeah, thank you so much for the short and brief introduction. My name is René Kouwenhoven. I'm a trade union official at FNV. My portfolio is international affairs for the sector of industry and agriculture, amongst others. How we came about this particular webinar, it is, well, living wages. It is already long-standing a topic that is a big concern for trade unions in general. But for us as FNV in the flower sector specifically, for us, it is important, well, first of all, to thank you all for participating in this webinar and really looking forward to an informative gathering and, of course, also respectful, but also open debates that will lead to betterment for all the workers in general and specifically in the flower sector in Uganda, because that is actually the high topic of today. Living wages for us as FNV, they are based on a human right. Everybody is entitled to at least earn a living wage. For us as trade unions, not only in the Netherlands, but on the international basis, it is based on social dialogue. Social dialogue, it is something that it doesn't come by itself. It has to be created throughout a mutual respect towards one another and all the participants who are in there. Freedom of association is one of the key elements that lead to at least the negotiations by collective bargaining towards living wages for all. Of course, based on the right of bargaining collectively, you have to take into account the economic situation per area, and that might be on national basis, but also on regional basis. It can differ in a country per region. Taking all these into account, we also realize, and that's well noticed through our contacts across the globe in the different regions, that minimum wages not always are on the level of at least a living wage, let alone the areas where we are talking about, but also in the Netherlands, this is still a challenge, and also in Europe. And well, I close up with this short introduction on why it is important for us as FNV in the Netherlands, but also representing all flower workers across the globe, and with that trying to achieve the process working towards living wages for all. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very fruitful meeting.
Thank you very much, René, and thank you very much for setting the scene and how this came about. Yeah, so this afternoon we will guide you through a couple of things. I will be kicking off with having the honors of this. The basis of this project was a research performed by Kea Tijdens and Maarten van Klaveren, which I will be showcasing the highlights of the research. Then we will be followed by panel discussions. We've got fantastic speakers from Uganda and Ethiopia and from the Netherlands. From Uganda, you will be hearing from Jennifer Nasali. From Ethiopia, I'm in the meantime double checking if he's already there, from Mr. Dawi Ibrahim, and then from the Employers Association, Douglas Opio in Uganda as well. Then after that, it will be followed by Jeroen Brandenburg from FNV Agricultural Green. And then the closing word is dedicated to Maarten as co-author of the research performed. Let me start by setting the scene a little bit in terms of the research done. And there we go. I'm assuming you guys can see my screen. If this is not the case, please let me know.
Can see it. Can see it.
Perfect. Yeah, so this research done, it was around closing the gaps between minimum and living wages in the cut flower supply chain, as said by Maarten McLaren and Kea Tijdens. And basically, for this research, they've done a very thorough desk research. First off, on the global scale, what are we talking about? How big is this industry? What are the details from it? Followed by more details on the 6 countries, where we also are gonna have a couple of speakers from later today. So by an estimation in 2021, the global production of the sector is around $60 billion, and the export covers $11 billion. 85% of cut flowers are sold domestically and 50% traded internationally. And as we all understand, cut flowers are highly perishable, so they demand efficient logistics. So therefore, in the 50s and the 60s, there was a huge advancement of cold refrigerated storage and commercial air transport that was allowing for a push to relocation of flower production to regions with cheaper labor and favorable natural conditions. And then in the 1970s onwards, there was an integration into global supply chains, including countries near the equator, allowing for all year round production and trade. And actually the Dutch flower auction currently seizing a role as chain director. So these are the 6 countries where we focused on for the research. So if we're looking at these 6 countries, so I'm now only focusing on the export value. The Netherlands stands out as the leading exporter of cut flowers globally, capturing over the half of the market share in 2021. Then Colombia and Ecuador ranked 2nd and 3rd with 15.8% and 3rd on Ecuador on 8.5%, followed by Kenya and Ethiopia on place 4 and 5, 6.6% and 2.3%, and then Uganda ranking 18th with 0.5%. So for the deep dive into these countries, we focused on a couple of thematic things that will be across all of those countries. So the local specificities of the sector, the relevant policies and infrastructure, employment and ownership around flower farms, working conditions, living wages, of course, labor relations, and the situation around trade unions, and the position of women. We will also share the links to the detailed report, but I try to do them all justice. But I obviously focus a little bit more on Uganda, Ethiopia, and the Netherlands because we have speakers present from there. I'm going to rush you through it. I try to keep it as short and concise as possible. Starting with Colombia. They're a major exporter with approximately 100,000 directly employed people. And looking at the gap between the statutory minimum wage and living wage based on WageIndicator data of 2021, the gap is for 2020. The gap is approximately between 43 and 83%. Women constitute a significant portion of the workforce, facing vulnerabilities such as economic insecurity and sexual harassment. Then we're moving to Ecuador. It's also an emerging player with, in 2021, 50,000 direct employed people. They have challenges with labor rights, mostly repression of trade unions, and also environmental challenges. And then looking specifically at the gap between minimum wages and living wages is approximately between 60 and 65%. Then flying to Kenya. Major exporter as of 2010, particularly in roses, with the Netherlands as a key market. The export value is around 726 million in 2021, with 100,000 workers directly working in it. Looking there at the living wage gap between minimum wages and living wages varies between 144 and even an enormous amount of 341%. Other challenges include competition in land and water use and environmental impact concerns. Then we go to Uganda. As said, a little bit more of a deep dive since our speakers are present from there as well. Ever since 1992, it started small with 3 cut flower farms and currently having more than 20 flower farms up and running. They are mostly centered around the Lutembe Bay in the Lake Victoria basin, and the availability of fresh, high-quality water and proximity to Entebbe International Airport facilitates export operations. However, the government support for flower producers is often lacking. Moreover, transport infrastructure remains limited, with rail and road networks undergoing rehabilitation. and also corruption poses challenges from time to time. Then when we look at employment, currently 8,000 direct employed people, with women comprising 70% of the workforce, and most of the flower farms are majority foreign owned. From 2018 up to 2022, WageIndicator performed a decent work check and saw positive improvements in terms of health and safety measures provided by employers. However, the reported level of sexual harassment in the workplace remains concerning, with 20% of respondents reporting such cases in the last year. Moreover, issues regarding working conditions are mixed up with environmental concerns. So particularly in the Lutembe Bay area, where the impact of flower farming on land rights, water use, and microclimate change is very significant. Then when we look at living wages, with actual, so with living wage for rural workers in Uganda, the gross is 771,000 Ugandan shillings. However, the gross wage is only 160,000 per month, showing a gap of 301%, and even a bigger gap with the statutory minimum wage. Moreover, the minimum wage has had minimal revisions since its establishment in 2017. There is an active collective bargaining agreement since 2013. At the same time, that has aimed to improve working conditions and wages in the industry. However, the effectiveness However, the effectiveness of these CBAs in addressing wage disparities has been very limited. And also the position of women remains a concern there. Quickly, a glass of water, sorry. Then we go to Ethiopia. The country's industry has been long established, and ever since the 2010s, the floriculture emerged as a significant export player. The favorable climate and fertile soils have created ideal conditions for cultivating a diverse array of flowers, particularly roses, and also available throughout the year. Between 2011 and 2020, there's been a significant growth. And even amidst the challenges posed by internal conflicts, Ethiopia's cut flower export remained resilient. Then when we look at government policies and infrastructure, there's been some benefits from both government policies and foreign investments ever since economic liberalization in the 90s. To regulate the industry and mitigate environmental impacts, Ethiopia developed its own national code of practice based on international standards. However, regulatory bodies responsible for enforcing these standards remain often undisclosed. And also corruption is here a topic of attention. Then when we look to employment, there are currently around 100 flower farms, with 60 being fully or partly foreign owned, and 45,000 people directly employed, with 2/3 of them being women. And the workforce challenges are around short-term contracts, compulsory overtime, limited job security. Concerns have been raised regarding health and safety, including exposure to pesticides. Issues like pollution, land rights disputes, and microclimate changes are intertwined with the sector's expansion. Then when we look at living wages, we see, first of all, there is no statutory minimum wage in Ethiopia. Therefore, when we look at average wages, the gap can vary from 82% up to approximately close to 400%. Between the average wage and the living wage. We calculate based on WageIndicator data from 2021 and 2022. When we look at labor relations and trade unions, often labor laws favor employers, allowing for flexible employment contracts and weak protection against dismissal. And also the position of women, they often face inequality, insecurity, and risk of sexual harassment. Then to the Netherlands. So the Netherlands, as I shared also in the beginning, they consolidate a dominant position, more than half of the global export. They're also the third largest importer of cut flowers globally, followed by, they're following United States and Germany. Kenya is the leading suppliers of cut flowers to the Netherlands, followed by Ecuador, Ethiopia, Belgium, and Colombia. Yeah. So back in 2019, close to 40,000 people were directly employed in the floriculture sector, of which close to 30% were labor migrants. And many challenges with labor supply have persisted ever since. Working and living conditions are often deplorable for the labor migrants. There have been some efforts to address these conditions, mostly highlighting the need for better employment practices and regulatory enforcement, but lack of compliance and weak regulatory frameworks remain. In terms of labor, the trade unions, so currently there's no specific trade unions for floriculture, but the sector is covered by FNV Agrarisch Groen, which represents workers' interests through CBAs. Well aware that I've rushed you through it, but I'm also in the interest of time, and I'm particularly interested to learn from the speakers that we have present today. Looking at, I will share the link of the report also in the chat, as well as a small short video. Now looking at Fiona, if she in the meantime has joined. Shantanu, can you help?
Not yet, no. Not yet.
Oh, right. All right, then I'm just gonna continue talking. Then maybe we can spotlight now the speakers. So I'm looking for our panelists, Douglas, Jennifer, and Mr. Dawi.
One second. I can't see Jennifer anymore. She was here just a minute ago. There she is. And Mr. Dawi, I'm not sure if. Okay, Vic, can you also help just search Mr. Dawi and look in the participants list?
Let me see if I see him. Looking at Gashao, have you heard from him if he was able to join?
They told me they are on the verge to join, but let me check. Let me check again. Sorry.
No worries. Let's see if he texted me. All right, then let's just go about it. Maybe Jennifer, maybe you can start with an introduction of who you are and what brings you here today.
Greetings, everybody. Lassa Jennifer is my name. I'm a General Secretary for Uganda Horticulture Industrial Service Providers and Allied Workers Union. It is a trade union that organizes workers in the flower sector in Uganda. And first of all, very grateful to the organizers of this webinar for hosting me and also for giving me the opportunity to be one of the panelists on this channel, on this panel. Douglas, I send you special greetings. Nice to have you here. Yes, I'm here because during the time when WageIndicators conducted the survey on the living wage and the benchmarking, HISPA was very, very much involved. I still remember very well that we worked very closely with the Federation of Uganda Employers, Douglas, and a colleague that used to come from Ethiopia, may his soul rest in peace, and others together to ensure that the information that was to come out of this report was as accurate as possible. That is one of the reasons why I'm here, but also as a union leader, as a workers leader, having been in the sector for some time now, close to 9 years, and engaging the employers in negotiations periodically to ensure betterment of workers' wages. I am really very, very interested in this topic, and even if I wasn't going to be a panelist and had the opportunity to be here, I would definitely be here. I hope I can stop there for now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Maybe Douglas, you can introduce yourself, and then in the meantime, no, go ahead, Douglas. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer, of course. So happy to see you as well. And a special appreciation to WageIndicator for this invitation. I'm personally happy to participate in this panel, mainly because the situation in Uganda, unlike other countries, we are not doing very well in this area. So it's always good to listen to others, what they're doing, and possibly what we could do better in Uganda. And happy with the quality of the research that we have at hand. It will allow us to have a good conversation. So I'm just here to have a good dialogue with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in the meantime, the host of our panel is here. Fiona, go ahead. In the meantime, I'm going to look for our other speaker.
Hi, everybody. I'm very sorry for being a bit late. I had some issues with the bank, unfortunately, but they are solved. I'm very sorry for being late, but I'm happy that that Jennifer and Douglas were already able to introduce themselves. And while Viv is looking for a third speaker from Ethiopia, perhaps while we're working and discussing Uganda, we have our two speakers from Uganda here. Maybe can I ask you, Jennifer, and afterwards Douglas, to focus on an initial question about how you both, from your perspective from employers and trade unions, see what the feasibility is of actually implementing the payment of living wages across the cut flower industry in Uganda, and to what extent do the both of you also think that the payment of living wages relates to improved working conditions overall in the sector? Maybe Douglas, you want to go first, and then Jennifer, you can reflect on that as well.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and nice to have you here with us. Now, speaking about the feasibility, first of all, I just want to put a bit of context. In Uganda, the flower sector is one of the most well-organized subsectors in the economy. In fact, it's the only subsector with the Uganda Tea Association that has a CBA in place. So there are very good commitments as far as workers and employers are concerned towards decent employment. Now, moving specifically to your question, the feasibility of a living wage in Uganda, the answer is a bit disappointing to maybe those who are listening. The answer is actually, it's not feasible because I consider living wage the second level of consideration that we should have. Ordinarily, we should be starting at the level of the minimum wage. The report talks about 130,000, but this 130,000 was derived from a survey and was actually not made statutory until now, because the Employment Amendment Bill has never been signed by the president, passed by Parliament, but sent back by the president and not assented to. The situation in the sector is a difficult one. When you compare us, for instance, with Kenya or Ethiopia, the report talks about it. Even just finding the right skills is a challenge for employers in Uganda. The infrastructure cost, in the case of Uganda, it's 3 times more. The freight cost, so transporting the flowers, so makes it rather difficult. We do not have, for instance, the benefit of economies of scale. The acreage under production is just around 270 hectares. And then when you compare that in Kenya, for instance, it's 4,000 plus. You compare that with Ethiopia, 2,500 plus. So we do not have the benefits of economies of scale that ordinarily would allow us to move towards a living wage. So first things first, it's important for us to start at the level of a minimum wage, and then progressively we can move towards a living wage. So as we stand now, I think it's not feasible. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Douglas. Jennifer, could you reflect on that from your perspective from the unions as well?
Yes, thank you, Fiona. Like my colleague Douglas have said, that there is need, of course there is need, to begin with having a minimum wage, because currently the Ugandan minimum wage as of 1968, I always mention, before I was born, is 1.5 euros a month, per month, not per day. And that is the current law. The 130 was out of a survey that was done by the Minimum Wages Board, which did not get to pass. However, to me now, as a union leader, I'm no longer looking forward to a minimum wage. Because I'll give you an example. In the sector, over the years, at least I'll tell you from 2015, when I became General Secretary to date, we have had periodic negotiations with the Employers Association in the sector, which is Uganda Flour Exporters Association. And as a result, we have signed the CBAs to the extent that today, in 2015, the minimum pay, the minimum basic pay, was 21 euros per month. As a result of periodic negotiations,
I think we lost Jennifer for a bit. Maybe we can try and see if we can get her video off. Jennifer?
130,000, which...
Oh, I think we lost her completely now. Oh no, you're back.
No.
Yes. You're back. Please continue, but keep your video off. That might help. That might help with the connection. Sorry, we lost you for a little bit.
Okay, let me switch off my video. Today, I was saying, sorry, before the connection went bad, I was saying that today, if the law of the minimum wage was to come, it might be 130 Uganda shillings, as was picked from the survey that was done by the Minimum Wages Board. As a sector, like I've showed you, we have already passed that. We have negotiated now to 55 euros per month. It means we have passed the stage of where the minimum wage might be set. So for us, we are no longer looking forward to the minimum wage. Of course, it's good if the country has a minimum wage. It is good if it was to be passed. But it's not something that we are really, really looking forward to. But in my opinion, I think it is very feasible for us to have to implement a living wage as a sector. But the question is, whom should this burden lie? This burden cannot be left to only the growers, the employers. It will take all of the actors in the flour supply chain to have the willingness to pay the living wage. From the employer, who are the growers, to the retailers, to the shops, everybody that is involved in this process to be willing to pay the living wage. Because if the will is there, then there can be a way. But now, as of now, I think the willingness is not there. And until we have the willingness from in all the actors, we are not able to have a living wage. But if the will is there, I'm sure the living wage can be implemented in the sector.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. Let's dive into that a little bit deeper as well in the course of the panel. For now, I would also like to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Dawi Ibrahim, who's advisor to the president of the Confederation of Ethiopian Trade Unions, a partner that we from WageIndicator and FFA have been working with for a long time as well, already in the cut flower sector. Mr. Ibrahim, can I ask you to, first of all, quickly introduce yourself, and maybe also already after your introduction, reflect on the question of to what extent there's actually a feasibility of implementing living wages across the cut flower sector in Ethiopia, also reflecting maybe on the minimum wage versus living wage gap in Ethiopia. Mr. Ibrahim.
Sorry for the delay due to the technical problem. First of all, please allow me to convey the sincere apologies of Brother Kasaon Folo, President of SETU, who, due to his prior commitment to other equally important official duties, cannot join us on this virtual meeting. He asked me to represent him at this event and wished us a successful meeting. Back to the issue at hand. In Ethiopia, we are the Confederation of Ethiopian Trade Unions is trying to install to fix minimum wage system in Ethiopia. This is simply, I think, it should be put into context that it's not living wage, but this minimum wage that we are pursuing in Ethiopia, and this is due to the labor legislation of the country, because the labor law recognizes establishment of minimum wage system in the country. Towards this, towards the realization of setting minimum wage in Ethiopia, SETU aspire to have a national minimum wage. Towards that, SETU conducted a research supported by Frederick Ebert Foundation, and the research was made with carried out by well-known researchers in Addis Ababa University. So here in our country, we have been demanding the fixing of this minimum wage for over 40 years. Still, there are resistance actually on the part of the government. The government is not willing to take serious steps to install this minimum wage system. The law was proclaimed in 2019. Now we are on 2024. For the last 5 years, the government has taken no measure to implement its own law. So the SETU, by carrying out research and having evidence-based arguments, exerted pressure against Ethiopian government. Not only SETU, but the ILO has joined this, ITUC, and other trade unions and donor organizations are exerting pressure, and the pressure is mounting. And the government recently is saying that they are studying to fix this minimum wage in the country. So back to the thematic question, implementation, the feasibility of implementing this minimum wage in Ethiopia, particularly in the cut flowers. It is very feasible to implement because, on the one hand, the employers and employers associations, particularly the Confederation of Ethiopian Employers Association and the Confederation of Ethiopian Employers Federations, are on the same page with SETU that they want to have a fixed minimum wage in all industries, including these horticultural enterprises. So the willingness of employers is one conducive situation to implement minimum wage in Ethiopia. The other is, Ethiopia is industrializing in the past 20, 30 years, past industrialization. There is double-digit economic growth earlier. Now it is around 5 to 6%, according to IMF and World Bank. So the economy is growing, and the country is being industrialized. These two situations, are conducive situation to implement minimum wage in Ethiopia. And the other, the other is with the help of the ILO, higher level tripartite meeting was held some 4 years before, and on that high level tripartite meeting, the parties to this minimum wage, the government, the then Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, the ILO. Pardon? There is intervention. Yeah.
Please continue.
No, go.
All the three parties, the employers, the trade unions, and the government agreed and drafted a roadmap to fix this minimum wage in the country. So that is a unanimous, they assessed the whole situation, that it is feasible to implement minimum wage in the Ethiopian economy. So as to the barriers, I think we will turn to those questions when time arrives.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Ibrahim. And thanks a lot also for highlighting the fact that in Ethiopia, we're talking about implementation of living wage, but we still first need to start installing a statutory minimum wage, which for you, of course, is an important factor that you are working on currently. So there is, for Ethiopia on the agenda, the necessity of working towards a statutory minimum wage. I would like to hear all of your reflections. So Douglas, Jennifer, and Mr. Ibrahim as well on the fact that we've seen in the presentation and in the research shows that there is, I would say, huge gap between the minimum wages, if they are there, and the living wages as estimated. in all countries of the study. So not only in Uganda and Ethiopia, but also across Latin America, in Colombia, in Ecuador, and in Kenya. To some extent, we've seen gaps of over 300% between the estimated living wages, which is based on cost of living, and the statutory minimum wage, if it's there. Jennifer touched upon this as well a little bit in terms of who should be responsible for starting to implement this, and where should this lie? Where should the responsibility lie? Could all three of you reflect on where you see current barriers for the implementation of working towards perhaps higher minimum wages, or the implementation of living wages? And where do you see opportunities for making this happen? Because I've heard from Jennifer that she sees feasibility of implementing, the same from Mr. Ibrahim, but there's also a gap of 300%. So where do we see an opportunity, and how can we tackle some of the barriers that are there to make this a reality? Perhaps Douglas, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I would like to start. First of all, I agree with Jennifer, the opinion that she asked, that it's feasible. I think the question is, how long will it take us to reach there? We all agree that that's the final destination. But in my case, I'm conservative because we can't arrive there quickly. Just to give you a scenario now, even with that, it's over 380%, 381% to be precise, the gap that we have now between, now I'm explaining between what is negotiated in the sector, the 160, but not the 130. So to move from 130 to the, from 160 to the living wage position, it's 381. But normal wage increases, annual wage increases, range just between 3 to 5%. This is where the difficulty then comes. Now, Jennifer touched a bit on it. For us to be able to overcome the barriers, first, a multi-stakeholder approach. If we take an approach that it's the employer to make it happen, it won't happen. So a multi-stakeholder approach, including the consumers, by the way, the willingness to pay a higher price for the cut flowers as well. That would be extremely important. The situation that we see now, there are certain things which are of an infrastructure nature. Like, for instance, in Uganda, the operation cost is simply way too high. So making it easier, in Ethiopia, you're having subsidies being given, cost of land being reduced, infrastructure being put near flower farms. It's not the case in Uganda. So you need the government to support the sector. And you have seen it also in the research as well. So government needs to play its part, supporting the sector to grow, making a lot more investment in the sector. Secondly, the issue of productivity also from the worker side. If the skills levels are a lot higher, then the quality of the flowers, the production capacity would go higher. So the higher the level of productivity, the easier also for the engagement in the CBA arrangement. Because while the negotiations are taking place, yeah, there's transparency. And it's possible to see where we stand as far as productivity is concerned. So for me, the second issue that needs to be addressed is the issue of productivity as well. I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ibrahim, do you perhaps want to reflect on this question as well, and what Douglas has shared from the Uganda case?
Yeah. Maybe the what my brother has said is, you know, in Ethiopia, this cut flower or horticultural industry is well supported and you know, facilitated. They are near the capital. The transportation is smooth because they are almost 130, 150 kilometers away from Ethiopia. The export, you know, the airport, and the road transport is very smooth, and land allocation, water, and the like are, yeah, they are well facilitated. But in our case, the barriers and opportunities, I would like to touch upon this. The barriers, as I said in my introductory remarks, that the political will is one of the barriers, because the government is not willing, almost for 4 or 5 years, they are not willing to move ahead to make progress on the implementation of this minimum wage. They almost are, they neglected their own law, the law they put in place, the labor law that they proclaimed in 2019. And that is one serious barrier. The second barrier is disagreement among key stakeholders on methods of calculating minimum wage, establishing essential baskets of goods and services. The stakeholders with the among enterprise owners, and some transnational companies, you know, they disagree on this how to calculate the methodology of calculating the minimum wage, and on essential baskets of goods and services that are component parts to fix minimum wage. The other is fear of the impact of fixing minimum wage. And the government now and then raise the effect, because they say that the fixing minimum wage might have impact on employment, on investment. It you know, reduce employment opportunities. They say they push away investors, and they also argue that it will have negative impact on competitiveness. The other serious you know, barrier is resistance by some transnational companies, particularly the Chinese companies. You know, now Ethiopia is penetrated by different kinds of investors from Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Arab countries, from China, from Turkey, from Western countries. All these companies have their own interest. And when they enter into investment agreement, come to Ethiopia, they are invited that we have cheap labor. And this very issue, you know, brought them here, and they want to you know, use that cheap labor, and they don't want to consider the conditions of workers. So these are the barriers, serious barriers in Ethiopia. As to the opportunities, as I have said, we are being industrialized. The economy is growing, and these are, you know, conducive for, you know, the consideration of economic situations in the country and social conditions, particularly inflation, high inflation in the country, where the purchasing power of wage dropped seriously. And you know, also the workers' condition also, help to consider fixing minimum wage for lower paid workers. That is also a good opportunity for us. I think our situation is similar to that of Uganda in the case of productivity, because productivity is low in Ethiopia, and some employers, raise the issue of productivity, where productivity is low and wages become higher, then it will be difficult for them to accept this fixing of minimum wage. So at least in consideration of the conducive situations that the economic conditions within the country and the social and workers' conditions in the country encourage fixing of minimum wage. On the other hand, these barriers and low productivity are also not helpful, at least in our arguments to install the system of minimum wage.
Thanks a lot. Jennifer, would you like to reflect on that before we head to another round where I would also like to invite some other speakers to reflect on this? How do you see these some of these barriers as mentioned by Douglas and Mr. Ibrahim? And would you maybe also reflect a little bit on what the role could be of collective bargaining agreements while they are in place in relation to perhaps implementing living wages across the sector?
Thank you so very much. Before I go to the barriers, I would like to start with the opportunities. The very first opportunity is the availability of information now on the living wage. Webinars, meetings, workshops have taken place since I don't know how many years. But personally, I have been attending these meetings, webinars, and workshops since 2018 on living wage. The information is now available to the extent that we already now have an estimate of what the living wage should look like. I think that is the biggest opportunity that is there. For the case of Uganda, my colleague Douglas already mentioned that the flower sector is one of the very organized sectors in Uganda, and yes, we are very organized. We have been having negotiations over the years, and for me, I believe that is an opportunity. There is freedom of association and freedom to collective bargaining. It is an opportunity that can easily be tapped into if we are to start the process of implementing a living wage. Of course, when we talk of implementing a living wage, we are not saying today and we are not saying tomorrow, but starting on a process for us to be able to implement a living wage. Then the other opportunity that I'm seeing here, at least with the discussions we have had with the employers of Uganda here, they accept that the living wage is possible to be paid. And the will is there within the local employers. At least we have had engagements. You see that the will is there, but the ability. Now, that takes me to the one barrier that I want to speak about, and that is the very low profit margin for the growers. It again takes me back to what I said earlier, that there is need to have the will of every actor in the supply chain for us to be able to implement a living wage. From the supermarkets, from the retailers, the traders, the consumers, everybody, their willingness to pay a little higher or to buy a little higher the flour in order to implement a living wage. I have been informed reliably by my colleague by my colleagues from the Netherlands that during the season or the period of Mother's Day, the flowers go very, very expensive. But people never complain. They still buy the flowers. This means that if tomorrow the retailers were to increase the price of the flowers will still be bought. But the question is, are the retailers willing to pay a little higher to the growers' price of the flower? I think for me, that is the main barrier that is there. It goes back, for me, it goes back. The willingness by all players in the supply chain to pay the living wage. If I was to, quickly to respond to what Fiona has asked, how I relate it to collective bargaining. Over the years, even when the times were toughest in 2020 of COVID, before the lockdown and after, in the flower sector in Uganda, we have always been able to come to the table and discuss issues related to pay, related to working conditions, no matter the situations. Yes, we disagree. It's not that we always agree. Yes, sometimes we disagree. For example, even right now, we are in negotiations and we have disagreed over and over, but we still come back on the table. So I believe with the continued space for us to negotiate, and with the continued will of the employers to have negotiations with the trade union, when there is the ability to pay a living wage or to start the steps towards paying a living wage, it will even make it easier for us as a sector in Uganda. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. And thanks a lot as well for making actually a perfect bridge to Jeroen Brandenburg, who's here from FNV and who was the director of agricultural green at FNV, the Dutch union, also working on the flower sector, as we've seen that the Dutch are, of course, a major player in this global supply chain. Jeroen, can I ask you to both reflect on what you've heard from the various speakers from Uganda and Ethiopia, as well as give a reflection of the role of Dutch growers and Dutch retailers in this global supply chain of flowers, and to what extent you see there's a feasibility to start paying the living wage. Jeroen, we can't hear you. Sorry.
It doesn't look like your audio is connected yet.
Maybe your audio has to.
No, he's muted. I'm going to ask. Okay, yeah, now you should be able to. He's unmuted now. Could you reconnect or maybe switch your audio source? The mic. So if you click on the arrow on the mic button at the bottom left of your screen, you should be able to select a different microphone.
Unplug your device, Jeroen.
Yeah, maybe if you took out your connected headphones, your laptop microphone might work instead. Would that be a possibility?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can
All
hear you
right.
now. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Let me see if I can do this. Hold on. I got so many screens on my desk. Where is?
Too much technology is never a good thing.
No, that's true. But I have heard you all. For me, it's very interesting to hear every problem it's happening also in Uganda, Ethiopia, and especially the minimum wages. For me, it's an eye opener because I didn't know how much the situation. Because I have a lot of contacts with Renee, and I'm also responsible for the flower sector in the wholesale, but also in the flower auction. And my colleague Leo is specialized also in the primary production of flowers. And we have almost the same problem what you have, and the same issues what we have, and especially also the way of collective bargaining. It's very hard at this moment to realize our objectives also. And what we do now is also negotiating, especially on the international level, especially also the role of Renee, and also the working conditions and the way of working with the local unions in Ethiopia, in Uganda, or and other places. Because we have also a problem to realize the minimum wages of the living wages also in Holland. And what we see is how we can work together in the special with the new guideline of the European Union to look into from, okay, what is happening in the whole flour chain, especially in the production countries in your countries, but also in the working conditions, specialized also in Holland or in Europe. And what we see is we have a lot of challenges from how we can increase the prices of flour also in Holland, but also in the auction prices. So we see there's a lot of challenge also for us, and I think also an opportunity to work together. So that's the main. What first reaction of what I've heard today is a very hard situation for all the workers in the production countries in Africa, especially if you see the gap between the minimum wage and the living wages. That was for me a little bit, eye opener.
Thanks a lot, Jeroen. Maybe Renee, I know you're officially not on the agenda here, but I've seen you nodding and and everything a lot. And as Jeroen was also reflecting on the fact that basically FNV in the Netherlands, where Jeroen is representing Dutch workers in this chain, and you from an international solidarity perspective are working with the local unions in the production countries where we did the research as well. Could you maybe reflect a little bit on what the role is of international solidarity with unions in this global supply chain, and where you see, after hearing the speakers, where you see some of the opportunities, perhaps? I know you see a lot of barriers, but perhaps where do you see some opportunities?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to reflect on this as well. And thank you for all the speakers so far for giving their perspective and their feelings about what is going on in the industry in a broader perspective. And that's good, because you need to take a global supply chain into account when you are looking into details like this. For me, both on a Dutch perspective, but also on the international perspective, is the procedure amongst the different trade unions in the different areas to be able to sit at the table based on the social dialogue to negotiate about a proper CBA based on fair wages. So that means that actually the growers in the different countries, they need to be put in a position that they will be able to pay at least living wages. And I don't accidentally mean at least living wages, because it should be the threshold and not the ceiling. So we need to look beyond that. And like Douglas was referring to, it is from the perspective of a country, it's logic that you look at it like that. But it all starts with the fact that over these years, and I'm working unfortunately already, and I've seen some familiar names in the participants. I've been working on the topic of living wages already for 20 years now. And I'm really ashamed about that. And why am I ashamed about that? It is because we didn't make any progress. If we look, for example, the usage of the World Bank poverty line still nowadays as one of the thresholds, it is really a threat for the workers. And if you start to talk about productivity, I think that is, well, in the Dutch saying, it is putting the horse behind the wagon instead of in front of the wagon. Because all these years, these workers, they have been paid a way too low wage. They never grown together to a higher level. So that means if we start talking about this, we need to look to the consuming countries as a whole. We have a total responsibility as a consumer country, whether it is in the US, whether it is in Australia, whether it is in Europe. Traders, trade, and retail all together need to take responsibility. Either they make the choice to have lesser profit, or they raise the prices in at the end consumer level, and it's not that big. If you use the currency of Uganda, well, it's about 1/100. And if you use the currency of the Netherlands, you're talking about euros. But the difference between paying a living wage for Uganda workers and the price which is paid at shop level, it's not that big. We need to start to take responsibility as consuming countries, that we put the companies in a position that they are able to pay their workers at least a living wage. And with that, you can easily close the gap. And unfortunately, we have been talking about this whole topic in the past within our covenant on cut flowers, and we didn't make any progress. We got stuck at the World Bank poverty line level. We never made a proper progress in that sense. And I'm calling upon all the people within the supply chain to take their real responsibility. And that starts really at, to my opinion, and I'm really blunt at that, and I'm not going to apologize for that. It is on retail and trade level. They need to start taking into account that they have a responsibility to pay fair wages for all flower workers across the globe. And that's not only the Dutch perspective, that's our international perspective as well. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks a lot, René, and clear messages as well. Maybe before I open the floor to some of the people in the audience as well, to share some reflections. I've seen a reflection from Caroline already on research done in the sector as well, where we see a high differences in wages as well in the flower on the farms as well. We'll come back to that in a bit. Caroline, I'll give you the floor perhaps to share a little bit on that as well. But before we open the floor for some final questions from the audience, I would like to ask Maarten van Klaveren, who was the lead researcher of the study that we've done in all the production countries, to share some of his reflections as well as conclusions hearing from the speakers today. And at the same time, Maarten, I would like to ask you to perhaps already set the scene a little bit for where you see some next steps in this discussion, because obviously we don't want this to be a final discussion on this topic, but rather this research and this webinar should be we need some follow-up after this, right? Maarten, go ahead.
Yes. Okay, can you hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in a way familiar, especially with the Dutch unionists, with Jeroen and René. I can say that I worked for, I think it's now nearly 50 years ago, with the FNV already. And indeed, it can be frustrating if you look back and see that these issues around minimum wages and living wages are pending for years and years. And although we now have better institutions in place, and we are not longer dependent on, let's say, the World Bank and other financial institutions to get the right data and so on, we are still fighting for more or less the same cause at the same level. You can say it's disappointing. Maybe my work as a researcher nowadays keeps me alive. That helps. And I want to pick up 2 or 3 things from the discussion. The first thing, I think it's important when you look in the production countries like Uganda and Ethiopia, to see that all speakers now emphasize the relation between labor rights, social dialogue, better CBAs, or at least the existence of CBAs, and decent wages. That, I think that's quite important, Renee said it already in his very first remarks, that we should keep up this issue, and even these countries are not the worst in the world. We know of many countries where trade union rights and the freedom of association are repressed. And I think it's important as a trade union international organization, but also all people who are involved in consumer and related organizations, to keep in mind that labor rights and the freedom of association is very much at the basis of all what we have to do. This is the first remark. Second, there are some developments, although they are very inuse. For example, the ILO has now accepted a resolution that states that living wages should be feasible. Fiona knows a lot more about this, and I will stick to that. But I think it's a signal, at least, that at the international level there is some recognition. But still, I agree with all you said, and also with my Dutch trade union colleagues, that these are just signals, and the whole process should be filled out in a way. The third issue, I think, especially our friends from Uganda, both Jennifer and Douglas, emphasized that there is a relationship between productivity and working conditions. And this is a very strong relationship, which is often neglected at the international level. And indeed, these relationships should be emphasized in all the initiatives, also at the retail and consumer level. I miss it a lot, to be honest. Also in ILO circles, it's not often debated, but let's say talking about high productivity is, to be very plain, bullshit if you don't relate it with day-to-day working conditions. I think this, for the moment, these are my remarks, and I hope this sparks some more debate.
Thanks a lot, Maarten. I see that Jeroen already wants to reflect on that, so go ahead, Jeroen.
I hear you. You still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Like we got changed the web browser, so thank you very much. What I remark, I'm very glad to hear the situation and the remarks of Maarten, because and especially from Renee and also our members from the other unions. I think it's a very new perspective of collective bargaining also in Holland, because I always address the way of chain. And I think that we have a lot of comment. The issues, not always in perspective, because we have a gap between 50 or 60% in the living wage discussion. It's especially the other discussion with 300% or 400% with minimum wages of that kind of stuff. But the problem is what I want to address is we have to learn from each other, because we have still the problem of collective bargaining to come into working place to discuss with the workers about their situation, especially also in Holland with a lot of migrant workers who are working in the wholesale, but also in the production side of flowers in Holland. So we have a lot of the same issues. And what my perspective changed the last couple of years is the international problems. I still address this also on the collective bargaining table in Holland, because we have to work together in this chain of flower production, because a lot of the production is coming to Holland, also to Flora Holland in the auction side, but also in the wholesale, because Holland is one of the biggest, the second production site in vegetables, flowers, or otherwise in the whole world. So I think I'm very I realize how big Holland is in this kind of production side of vegetable or flowers or other production in agriculture. So and we have a lot of shit situation also in Holland. So it's not the best working condition also in Holland. So I think we and also with Renee, I feel responsible to do my part also in Holland, and also in Renee, an international way of working together on how we can improve the working condition, but also the living wage discussion in the whole chain of flower production. So, so that's my perspective, and I hope to work together with all you people in all of the world to improve the situation. That's what my goal is for the coming years.
Thanks a lot, Jeroen. I would second that for sure. Maybe Jennifer, Douglas, and Mr. Ibrahim, after having heard from Jeroen that the situation in the Netherlands has actually quite a lot of similarities with the situation. Yeah. Well, similarities in challenges.
Challenges, yeah.
That to what you have explained that happened in your countries. How do you see for the future and perhaps also some next steps in this debate about how we get to actual payment of higher wage? And I also want to second what Renee has said, that the payment of living wages should be not the top, but should be the starting point, perhaps. And maybe Mr. Ibrahim, you want to reflect a little bit on this notion from Jeroen on working together in international solidarity, and perhaps also learning from each other on how we can improve.
Yeah, thank you. We have the CETU had close contact with FNV, and FNV is helping the Ethiopian trade unions in many ways, and that is one. Second, in Ethiopia, the largest floor cutting companies are Dutch companies. Share, for example, based in a place called Zuwai, one of the largest, employing about over 10,000 workers. And here the Dutch companies, rather than others, because they have well-developed culture of industrial relation, thanks to the Dutch trade unions. They are they try to have a smooth relationship with unions and with workers. So about 120 flower growing enterprises in Ethiopia. Of all, the Dutch companies are better in many aspects, because they allow the workers to be unionized. Collective bargaining is possible in Dutch companies, and provisions of fringe benefits and supports to workers is satisfactory. Irrespective of that, still we have a problem concerning the fixing minimum wage. Of course, the Dutch companies are through their association, they are supportive of fixing minimum wage system in Ethiopian economy, and I think though there is serious global problem concerning this value chains. I think we have a lot to learn from FNV, from Netherlands trade unions. I think they have all the capacity to technically and professionally assist the Ethiopian trade union movement to cope up with the challenges we are facing. As to the what should be done in the future, I think one of the best way to tackle the challenges, the barriers here in our country and all over the globe is, I think, trying to apply the due diligence guideline of UN. I think Germany has also had now a guideline. EU has already issued. I think this due diligence is about workers, and I think the due diligence can humanize humanized international multinational enterprises and these complex value chains all over the globe. That is one best way, just advocating for countries to adopt a national action plan to implement due diligence. That is one. I think the other is what Wage Indicator is doing, conducting robust studies, concerning this long overdue demands of workers all over the world. Demands minimum wage, then a living wage. So I think research study will help us to come up with authentic, reliable data to argue our case at national and international level. That is, I think, your work, your activity is very, very important to tackle these challenges, local and international. The other one, in our case, I think we need to mount pressure on the government. So the Ethiopian Trade Unions is doing that. We need the support of other national centers, the ITUC, ILO, and other advocates of respect and protection of human and labor rights. So I think these are the major ways we should pursue to overcome these challenges.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Ibrahim. I would like to ask both Jennifer and Douglas as well to share some final reflections, perhaps from your side, on where you think next steps should take place, as well as if you want to reflect on what you and Mark and Renee have shared. Douglas, you want to start?
Yeah, thank you so much. So grateful to Jeroen and Martin, the insights they have provided. But I just want to reemphasize the need for us to work together even more because of the magnitude of the problem. I just want to illustrate it in terms of numbers. For instance, in Uganda, we are at 160 now, 60,000 now. We have to move to 770,000. Now, that's a leap of 381%. Now, if we are to go by the current estimates of annual wage increases, which is just about a maximum of 5%, we would take 76 years to be able to do that. But even then, it's a moving target. By that time, things would be a lot more different. So it's urgent, the point I make. It's urgent that we need to work together. First of all, the starting point is what you're doing right now. Generating evidence, holding workshops like this, webinars together, then we can move towards this direction. Secondly, exploring possibilities on the consumer front. How can we start to have this consumer education, consumer engagement, so that we move already towards this possibility. Thirdly, is to engage stakeholders beyond the flower sector. For instance, the transporters, they have nothing to do with us, but we need to really begin to speak to them. So engaging stakeholders beyond the flower sector. So when we have a conversation like this, we bring other people who could facilitate this process as well. But other than that, very happy to continue to engage on this topic, and I hope we will arrive at a living wage soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Douglas. Jennifer?
Pleasure.
Some final reflections from your side?
Yes, thank you, Fiona. Taking into consideration the fact that workshops have been taking place for some time now. Research has been done, reports are now out, information is out there. There is need for committed organizations, committed individuals, committed organizations to take lead of the next steps. Take lead of the next steps. Like Douglas has said, there is need to sensitize the consumers. There is need to sensitize the retailers, for them to understand the importance of this discussion to the workers in the growing companies. The question becomes, who is going to take the lead? Because if we have an organization, for example, FNV, to take lead, and then all of us who have understood this importance are behind FNV, then I think the living wage can be realized in the near future, not 76 years from now. So for me, I'm not only asking the questions, but I also request FNV, because I believe the FNV, in my opinion, as a trade union, they are now more placed to take lead of the next steps, having gotten now a report from the wage indicators. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. And thanks a lot, everybody, for being here with us and this full 1.5 hours listening to everybody. I would kindly like to try and see if we can wrap up this discussion, and also see if we can find some common ground for some next steps, I think, after this important research that has been done, as well as this webinar. I think for us, this webinar was really a first step in furthering this discussion, because what we've heard is that the research laid bare that there is quite some challenges still that we have to address. There's huge gaps of close to 300, sometimes 400% in minimum wages and living wages that we have to start addressing, and hopefully not wait another 20 years, because I think Renee will not be happy with that. And I'm also taking note of a lot of the things that have been said today, which I think are important topics that we take into account for further discussions. Some of these are, for example, taking a human rights due diligence lens, like Mr. Ibrahim has shared, and really looking at how can we look at the whole supply chain from a human rights due diligence perspective, also now that things have become mandatory and legally mandatory in many countries. Furthermore, I think it's also important, and this has been addressed by Renee a little bit, is that we take into these discussions some stakeholders that we have not heard per se today. And some of these are really the producers as well as the retailers. And within this discussion, I know they are absent at the moment, or maybe they're in the room, but we haven't heard from them. That might be possible. But in order to have meaningful stakeholder engagement, as Douglas said, it's important that we have all stakeholders as part of this discussion, of course. So we're hopeful that we will continue these discussions on how we can move towards living wages in the supply chain, also with retailers and producers as well. And furthermore, and that is something that we have not really touched upon during this webinar, but Jennifer has mentioned it a little bit, and Fikran has also shared it in the presentation, and that is the issue of migrant workers, and especially also the challenges that female workers, who constitute a huge part of the workforce, are facing on a day-to-day basis. And I think when we talk about next steps in this work, is also addressing the wage inequality when it comes to female workers on farms, as well as migrant workers that are present not only in the Dutch sector, but also in the Ugandan and Ethiopian sector. So for us, this is really a first webinar of many, we hope, and a discussion to be continued. Thanks a lot for being here, all of you. Thanks a lot to René, to Maarten, Douglas, Dowie, Jennifer, and Jeroen for the speakers, and all our speakers. And thanks a lot for all of you for being here. We will share the recording of the webinar with all of you after this session, as well as the reports, the visual and the video, so you have plenty of time to let it all sink in. And please feel free to reach out to us or the colleagues at FFA if you have more questions or would like to continue working with us on this important topic. And with that, I would like to wish you a lovely rest of your day or evening, and we'll be in touch. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.